I think the opposite. I think let it go. When you have someone on who's really good, I want to hear everything. Frankly, if you guys just had a conversation where you talked about membership sites and then you stopped and you said, "Oh, what did you have for breakfast today?" That humanizes the person for me. That's kind of interesting. When you go off track a little bit, that's also interesting for me. I think the audience here would be fascinated to know that I'm now at a Regis office and that I'm traveling the world with just a laptop and a microphone, but not traveling like one of these digital nomads. It gives them a little bit of sense of who I am. If I were to throw in some random fact like I got married about a year ago, I think they let them know who I am, and it doesn't detract from the interview. And so I'd say, do as little editing as possible, get that stuff out there, and your mistakes and the parts that don't seem to fit with the main message of the interview are just going to add more color to the interview, and they're going to take your time away from editing and let you do things that you're more passionate about.
And a good point, because I didn't start this interview saying, Andrew, how did you get started? Because a lot of other people have kind of already addressed that, and I know those interviews are out there, and so I didn't ask those questions, and yet you're saying, you get that background information even if they've been interviewed 100 times and already answered those questions. Is that kind of your mantra?
I think so. Well, yes and no. If the question has been asked 100 times, then no, you don't need to do it. But if you start off really well, and it's hard to start off well, but if you start off really well with, hey, Andrew, how big is the site now? Who are you talking to? Get people really excited. If I come out with something that's really powerful, then the audience starts to say, all right, I know I'm going to get meat in this interview, but I also would like to have some dessert. I'd also like to have a little bit of relaxed conversation in there, and that's fine, I think. But more important than any of that, you just take the stuff that you don't like to do off your shoulders. You get to now have a simpler program that you can pass on to someone else and let them edit it. I didn't do that in the beginning. I didn't take this advice at first. But then I just would go through insane amounts of time editing, and then editing makes you question yourself. You say, why did I say that? Well, let me go and delete that stupid statement that I said. What did I say? I just insulted myself there because I was at a moment of weakness, and I said, I'm a terrible interviewer in the interview. Why don't I go back and edit that out? As long as I edited that out, it's unfair for me to say I'm going to edit out stuff that makes me look bad, but not stuff that makes my guest look bad. Why should Jimmy Wales, who did an interview here, not get edited out when he said that he failed with his first company? And then you never stop. And my wife read an article where Gary Vaynerchuk said he doesn't do any editing. I said, you know what? If he's not doing any editing, the guy knows something here. Why don't I try it? Let me just let it go. And at first it was really tough because I felt I was putting subpar material out there. Then I realized, you know what? It's blogging. It's the internet. It's all sub-perfect, but all these little jagged edges are what give it personality. And people are much more forgiving and much more connecting when it's like that. So that's the direction I took. I'm not saying that going in the other direction doesn't make sense. I'm not saying somebody listening to us, you shouldn't say, hey, I want a polished product because everyone is like Andrew who's putting rough edges on their stuff. I'm just saying it helps me pump stuff out, helps me focus on what I care about, and helps me outsource some of the work that I don't like doing. And then you know what else you could do? I did this recently. I needed people to take action on something, to vote for me for some South by Southwest thing. And I remember, well, a lot of people, who's going to go and vote just to vote? So what if I say vote and then I'll give you something in return? So what can I give them in return? I'm not giving them an iTunes gift card or anything that's going to cost me money. Oh, you know what? I'll take one of my unpolished interviews and I'll clean it up. And now I'll say it's remastered, and I'll put that out there. Do you know how many people wanted a remastered past interview? I thought, wow, that's kind of interesting. Maybe what I do is I put out that first version that's more real, and then for people who want the remastered, I could come back and pick just the select interviews and remaster them.
Yeah, good. I like the idea. Give them some motivation to do what you're asking them to do. Well,
Yeah.
Because you don't edit, have you ever asked, has somebody ever asked you, Andrew, I didn't do really well there. Please don't use that interview.
I used to do that. I used to accept editing on behalf of my guest. But it drives me nuts now because as soon as we're done, I send it over to Joe to edit it, or I've edited myself, and then it's in the pipeline, you know. Then it goes to the transcribers to do their work, and it's being formatted, and it's being ready to go online the next day. And if you just want me to edit out one word, the whole system's out of whack now, and I have to go back and undo it, or I don't have an interview for tomorrow. And so now I say, look, we can't do it. I have a membership site. What I can do for you is say, you don't feel comfortable having that out in public? I'll put your interview just for members only. and that's the best I can do. And most people are okay with that.
How about somebody who said, Andrew, if well, first of all, do you get them to sign a release before you interview them?
No, I don't. I maybe I should get them to do it, but I don't. I feel like I'm a reporter, and reporters can't say sign a release.
Yeah, that's good. And we talk about doing releases, and some we get, some we don't. But I don't not do an interview if they don't or if I forget. So I guess in some sense we're hanging it out there a little bit, but for the most part, if you treat people well, I think you're probably okay.
I think so too. That's what I'm banking on.
Let me ask you about the business side of things, because you have sponsors of your interview, usually a couple or three sponsors, but then you also have a membership site. This is kind of a broad question, but how do you combine the two of those for revenue for the company?
So sponsorship goes on now. I put 3 sponsors, half a minute each one, before an interview. It's a little annoying to do a pre-roll, and I wish I didn't, but I can't bring myself to interrupt an interview with a spot. Maybe I should, but I just like the flow of the interview. And then the membership stuff is for anything that's older than a week or anything that's especially fiery that the audience doesn't, that the guest wants to have wants in the membership site. So the reason that I did membership is because I wanted to check out new revenue sources. I believe that if I said that the work is so good that people should pay for it, that the work will get good and get better and better and better to earn what people are paying for. I also saw something else. I talked about, I think, Seth Godin's interview here. Seth Godin's interview was terrific on day one that I published it, but as soon as it became a day old, it got fewer viewers, and then 2 days old, it got fewer viewers still, and then a year old, and people pretty much neglected it. Seth Godin's got so much content online that I'm not even dragging his users from Google searches. I think my Seth Godin interview might be on the 3rd or 100th or who knows what page on Google search results for the name Seth Godin. So because it's old, it just gets lost, and there's no value on it, and people don't care. I said, all right, if no one's watching this stuff anyway, I'm going to be the one who cares. I'm going to put a price on it, and I'm going to say, if you want this older interview, it's in the vault, you have to pay for it. And suddenly people were up in arms. You would think that they were fighting to listen to Seth Godin and all these other interviews every day. You would think that they weren't ignoring it, but in fact that they were passionately re-listening to these interviews 5-10 times. What they started to realize was, oh, this is now valuable too. We accept that what Andrew's saying, this mirage that Andrew created is reality. Suddenly older interviews are more valuable. Now they're fighting for access to them. What that did is two things for me. First, it brought in some revenue, and second, it let me test out a membership site. And then in the future, I'd like to add more stuff, more features to that membership site. But for now, that's what I have. Oh, and it also brought in some revenue.
I know for people starting out, do you recommend them building a following first and then do a membership site, or should I go out and get sponsors right away even though I may not have many listeners? How do you recommend just starting out?
I like just testing everything and seeing what works, or testing what you can without getting too distracted. But setting up a membership site isn't that tough. If I had to do it over again, I probably would have set up a membership site earlier. I probably would have done it right away. Let everyone know this stuff is so good that it demands payment. It calls for you to pay for it. And then it also keeps the backlash down. In fact, there's no backlash. Everyone knows right away this stuff is going to be charged. It's going to be a premium service you have to pay.
And I know you got a lot of mail that was like, I will never pay for anything. I'll never come to your site again. I think my response has always been, ignore those people. They wouldn't have become members anyway, even though they said they would. They're lying. So how did you kind of deal with that when you had to switch over and say, look, guys, I'm spending a lot of time on this. I need to make some money.
I just listened as much as possible. I accepted that I wasn't going to be perfect with it, and we'll have to adjust. And I took it, and I did suffer a little bit when people who I had respected and who I admired said, "What are you doing? That's nuts." But I was also supported by people like you and past guests. Jason Fried, who I mentioned of 37 Signals, sent me a nice note saying, "Hey, I don't know if this is going to work what you're doing, but I think you should charge for something." And I said, "All right, well, let's be." There are enough people who I respect who say give it a shot that I'm going to keep going with it.
And I think that's why Jason Fried's interview was my favorite, because I've seen other webinars he's done and other presentations at conferences, and he is like, business is very easy. You come up with a product and you charge for it. You don't come up with a product, make it free, and figure it out later. I love that guy's his perspective on charging for what is valuable is I couldn't agree more with it, and I love to hear other people. But it seems like they're the minority. We're the minority of people that charge for content. There's still this idea that content needs to be free. I mean, what do you tell people when you say that's not the case?
You know what I get is this weird thing where people say, I thought you wanted to help, man. I thought you wanted to help, and here you are just trying to make money. As if the two can't go together somehow. I don't know where it comes from, this idea that I got an audience of business people. You think business people would say, okay, money doesn't necessarily corrupt. Money is not a bad thing, but I think these guys are setting themselves up for a failure of a life when they don't care about that. But I saw this years ago. I mean, you bring up the fact that there was a period there in the internet where people didn't think that they needed to make a profit. I was very quietly bringing in millions of dollars in revenue at Bradford and Reed, the company my kid brother and I started out of school, while everyone else was saying, no, making money is stupid. You need to invest in your business. You need to spend money to grow market share. And then I watched them all just disappear. They had no power to stay because they couldn't keep getting investors in the door. They couldn't keep living this really crappy life where they were proud of how they were sleeping in these crappy homes because they didn't really care about stuff. You know what? Not caring about stuff and living in a crappy home and just riding a bicycle because you can't afford a car, because you refuse to spend money on a car, because you don't care about stuff. It gets old really, really quickly, and eventually you say, "No, you know what? I'm only going through life once. I gotta have something. I gotta have heat in the winter. It's not so cool that I'm still living like I just came out of college." And at that point, you start to respect, hopefully, the person who's making money. Or maybe some people think the opposite. Maybe at that point they'll start to resent the people who are making money. Well, if not for Andrew making money off these guys in a world where Andrew's making money, then the world would be a better place and we'd all live happy. I don't know. I guess that's what's
I hear you. Absolutely. You're absolutely right. Well, I'm going to ask you the tough question because I'm asking the guy who asks the tough questions. Yep. How much money do you make from sponsorship? How much money do you make on your membership?
I'll be honest and say I don't know how much money I'm making on my membership. I don't know. I know that I get on average one person a day who signs up to my site. $25 membership is what I charge. I have to go in, and maybe there's a better way. I actually now I invested in a startup that is going to hopefully make this easier. The way I do it now is I have to go into PayPal and export all the PayPal payments and find a way to get them into my accounting program, QuickBooks, and then figure out what's really a payment and what's not a payment. And PayPal doesn't export all the data properly. There's got to be a better system, but I don't know what it is. In fact, I'll ask you in a moment what it is. And I just can't figure it out. And it's just, to me, it's just a headache. So I spend very little time on that. Maybe every few months I'll sit down and I'll go through it, and definitely by the end of the year I'll have it all down. But I know that for my personal finance, I go to a site like Mint.com. It just sucks in all my data from PayPal, sucks in all my data from Citibank, from my credit card, and it tells me exactly how much money I spent on milk. It tells me how much money I spent on movies and so on. It categorizes it beautifully, but there isn't anything like that yet for business. As I said, I did an angel investment in a company that will hopefully solve that. I see that there's a company called Zero.com that recently got a $2 million investment to come to the U.S. and maybe solve that problem. I don't know what the answer is there yet.
So you're not sure how long your members stay?
Nope. I don't even know. That's a good question, too. Exactly. How long is the average member staying? How can I tie that back to where I got them? I can't tell you with the plugin that I use what got in each member. And I'd like to be able to go in, if only out of curiosity, but more importantly, to be able to say, my best members are coming from the interview that I did with Tim Berkwin a few months back. I need to find an excuse to have Tim Berkwin on once a month so that I can hopefully grow the revenue. I can't do that. I don't have a membership plugin that can do that. And that's where I am right now. And I'm hoping that these guys will fix it. In my past interviews, I've urged guests to create that kind of a system, but I don't have it. Do you have that? Would you know how many people signed up to your site because of Andrew Warner's interview?